Have you guys heard of the Palworld lawsuit that's happening? With, I think it's with Nintendo? Or with Pokemon in general? Like, that's wild. And, like, you would think they were getting sued, right? You would think they were getting sued because it is about, you know, oh, the pals look way too similar to Pokemon. And that's just not the case. Like, that's not what they're being sued for. Like, it's actually kind of wild. It's wild indeed.
On.
Hello there.
Hello, Kronos. Would you like to tell chat your credentials?
I mean, my background is in, legal and regulatory compliance now. I've been working in law for God knows how long. So cases like these kind of fall across my desk on a fairly regular basis. Normally it's a small amount, but, large companies like Pokemon Company going at Pocket Pair is not necessarily a small case. I mean, there's some really interesting things about this one, though. And I think that
the reason that should have been sued for is the designs, really.
Yeah, I'm gonna read
through it. Exactly. And apparently, from what I've gathered, every time Pokemon or a Nintendo, I'm gonna say Nintendo, has sued someone, they've never lost. They have never lost a lawsuit. It's just kind of, and it's not for like it being too similar to Pokemon. It's for patent infringement. Like, patent infringement. Little, like, minuscule things that I feel like you find in so many common games that, like, it was revolutionary at the time of its creation, but it's like you can't advance or work around the kind of mechanics that the game has without doing those things, at least for right now. The reason that, yes, a couple pulls are just traced from pals. Yeah, no, definitely. Because you can ride the pals is one reason. Nintendo didn't create the idea of riding animals. Exactly. Patents that were filed recently, if I remember correctly. Let's take a look, guys. Take a look.
Report on patent
Let's ask the
lawsuit.
Neanderthals if they want to sue for
lawsuit
writing.
Brought against Pocket Pair and did not reveal any information about it. Looks like we finally got that info now because Nintendo neglected to tell the public what it was. They just said multiple patent infringements. So as announced on September 19th, 2024, the Pokemon Company and Nintendo Company Limited, hereinafter referred to as the plaintiffs, have filed a patent infringement lawsuit against us. We have received inquiries from various media outlets regarding the status of the lawsuit, and we'd like to report the details and current status of the case as follows.
That's crazy.
Details of lawsuit number 1. Plaintiffs claim that Palworld, released by us on January 19, 2024, infringes upon the following 3 patents held by plaintiffs and are seeking an injunction against the game and compensation for a portion of the damages incurred between the date of registration of the patents and the date of filing of this lawsuit.
What?
Number 2, target patents. Patent number 7545191.
That's how many patents they freaking have, or at least one of maybe more patents that they have.
An application date, July 30th, and registration date.
So you're right, Lightning. It was recent. It was very recent.
August 27th, both in 2024. Patent number 7493117.
All of these patents are in 2024.
February 26th, May 22nd. That's after they launched the game. All of these are after they launched the game.
So what grounds are you doing it? The patent was done after they launched the game. I feel like that shouldn't count. That shouldn't matter.
Summary of the claim: an injunction against Palworld, payment of 5 million yen. Wait a minute. Let's go to
30.
A patent on having a game run during loading screens only recently expired. A game running during loading screens? What? That was an actual patent? That doesn't make any sense. Nintendo's just petty, I say.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
$3,000, I think.
They're setting precedent with this, aren't they? That's all they're doing.
Yeah. This is purely about the fact that we've not really had a case like this ever hit the courts and hit kind of the public eye in the same way. So this isn't about, we want a huge amount of money out of
$32,000, $33,000.
Principle that if we have a patent on a game function,
like a mini game during loading? Really?
we can bring a court case for it, and that there's at least indication, even if it's only a settlement, that they can go ahead and do that, and it becomes the norm. So
it's even worse because they're basically setting the precedent that you released your game first, we can file for a patent later, get the patent registered, and then come back and retroactively attack you.
Exactly.
And they're setting precedent for that over $32,000.
Yeah,
which is such
wild.
A small amount. That's wild.
Yeah, the patents themselves
exactly what I'm saying.
Quite interesting as well, if you look them up, because they're very, very vague. I mean, the first one there
super
is about providing
vague.
A game program or system or method that can cause a character to cause various types of actions on a field in a virtual space.
What?
So, when, for example, the character is dragged into, a different stage for the combat, and then there's a whole bunch of kind of specializations on top of that. So it's very specific.
So this is exactly the one that I thought it was, which is in a 3D space, throwing an object and then having the object hit a target and then capture that target to be put back onto your team, which they launched in Legends of Arceus originally. So this one is actually the Legends of Arceus one, which I believe actually went forward in 2022, unless they're talking about the Japanese one, which is a separate one for this. Yeah, it's the Japanese one. So US was 2023, Japanese was 2022. It's interesting because they have this listed as July 30th, 2024,
exactly.
and August 27th,
which makes me believe that the reason why it's almost like they updated it for 2024. The suspicion that I have is that they did it, rewrote the patent under a pretense that convicts Palworld for infringing against their patent. That's what it says to me. Like that, they purposely, if it came out in 2021 in Japan and they were revising this same patent in 2024 with more specificity, being more specific, it seems like it's in a direct attack. It is direct attack. Is that harassment?
2024. I think they're actually incorrect about this because this is showing Japan 2024, but there's a US patent and a Japanese patent prior to this that was there. So this is the one I was reporting on before as being like, hey, they did this there. The interesting part about this one, the one that I found to be fascinating here, was if we go and look at Palworld actually launched with this functionality in January 18th, 2024. But if we go look at Pocket Pair and we go back to the game Craftopia, which is also by them, you'll see down here, Craftopia actually has this exact same functionality. You can see it right there under the, capturing monsters in a monster prison.
And Craftopia isn't being sued here. Palworld is.
And you have to aim it and throw it inside of a 3D space exactly as this patent describes. But this game came out in 2020, which is long before. So this
before
is
the
kind of
patent.
weird to me. I don't know enough about Japanese law, and I don't know if you do either for this. Do we know if prior art even matters in Japan?
It's relevant because ultimately a patent comes down to who created this idea and is registering for it first. So there's always, it's kind of like a possession is 9/10 of the law kind of situation where if you have it in a game, it's already indicative that you've created it and you've done it. And then
so if that's the case, this completely creates this argument where even though this game with this functionality had came up before the patent was done in Japan, and since games like that already existed before the patent existed, then that should, I guess, theoretically null the patent because it already existed in other games before the patent. Therefore, the patent, which gives you the rights, kind of giving you the claim, like this guy said, like you created this, it's kind of null and void at that point, no?
And you have to get down into arguing with the patent office.
What do y'all think?
Contesting, the patent claim itself. So while this patent is, filed, it's valid, whether good or bad reasons.
Isn't that also what happened in Digimon as well? Like, yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Seem to have questioned.
We gotta look at the years for this. It seems like that's the main thing.
Write off the merit of it. This has to be a lawsuit about it. It's like I said. This is all coming down to precedent. Ultimately, Nintendo. If I was inside Nintendo right now, my thoughts would be, okay, we've taken a massive kind of public image hit for going after Palworld.
Yeah.
So we can't really drag this on. We need to do something that's going to set us up well for the future.
Digimon didn't usually throw a ball, I think.
Better.
Yeah,
so
I think it was just battling, right?
Either in court or in terms of settlement that we can do this and it's okay, and that businesses will just kind of make their mind up and the public outcry will go away. It appears to be like that kind of approach because the amount they're actually asking for is significantly less than I would have expected, given the amount of money that they're alleging Palworld's made based on their patent.
If Pocket Pair gives in and settles, which $32,000 is a meme when we're talking about the hundreds of millions that both sides, they just have infinite money at this point. If they settle for that, does that still set precedent as well? I don't know enough about that process. Not
legally binding precedent, but it makes it this kind of the convention. It makes it the norm that companies can do this and they can just kind of settle it between themselves. So it doesn't deal with in a legal room. It doesn't mean that if it does go to court, they'll automatically win in future. But it means that the public are going to be a little bit more used to the idea of this, and it won't be quite as new and as fresh. Given that we're already seeing other lawsuits from companies, this might become the norm, and we don't really want it to go through. I think if I was from a consumer perspective, I would far rather that this go to court and it fail on its merits.
I agree.
But that's obviously a risk for Palworld, and if they're happy to spend $64,000, which is that would be cheaper for them than going to court and fighting it.
Yeah, no, I super agree. It's not even 64; it's 32,000. So it's even less. I think it's wild.
It's kind of crazy because it's like, do you fight on this thing because of the merits? Like, it seems like as a consumer, like what he's saying, like it feels weird and it's almost disappointing. Where it seems like with the sequence of events, Palworld is for the lawsuit to be taken in this way. It doesn't make sense. Like, we all knew looking at Palworld, we're all like, this is Pokemon. Like, this is Pokemon. There's no way to look at it in a way where it's not Pokemon, you know? Just with more features. It's like Pokemon plus. But to be sued for patents, which kind of don't make sense. Patents, it seemed that to be renewed specifically to target Palworld, it just doesn't seem right. And from what's saying, the millions upon millions of dollars that Palworld has made off of Palworld, it's almost like, okay, like, do you just pay the $32,000 and you just call it a day? And like, that's the end of it? Or do you fight it for the merit of it because what they're suing for doesn't make sense, and then you just stop? There's more to it? Is there? Please explain. Please inform me.
5 million each, too.
It's all out of spite and Nintendo likes to be a bully. That's what I've heard. I've heard Nintendo doesn't play very nicely, especially in court. They can put an injunction on the company. What do you mean by that?
Two parties, so 64,000.
Okay. The part that really gets me about this is Legend of Arceus actually had a worldwide release in January 28th, 2022, a full 2 years after Craftopia, which Craftopia also has the same mechanic, also by Pocket Pair. This feels like there's just no case here, man. Like, this is super wild. It doesn't. You have them releasing a game with the mechanics after Pocket Pair. You have them patenting after Pocket Pair even launched Palworld. And after Pocket Pair launched Craftopia. And then retroactively going back and be like, you violated our patents, even though you had that to market first. Like, that's what it looks like to me. And I hope they fight Nintendo, man. Like,
I hope they do too. So the fee is one part, but they also want the right to remove parts of their game at any time. See, that don't work. They have to fight it. Like, it's one thing if it's about the design. Right? The design looks too much like a bunch of Pokemon characters. I can agree. That, to me, legally, in my tiny brain, makes sense. These things look very similar, and it is very obvious, whether it's made with AI, whether it's made with a contemplation of different images conjuncted together to create something quote-unquote new. What this looks like is the lawsuit that is being made now shouldn't be the lawsuit that was supposed to be made, But to be fair, Nintendo took items from... what do you mean? Nintendo took items from what? Heck, some Pokemon characters look like Dragon Quest enemies. Really? I would love to see, side-by-side comparisons.
If that's the case, I hope they do.
Principle perspective.
Yeah.
But
I hope they do from a principle perspective. But if Nintendo went to go ahead and to sue because certain features look too much like pre-existing before the game came out characters or merchandises, then by all means, I feel like Nintendo's in the right. But this seems like it was very strategically done to bully Palworld.
About how it plays out. They've got this lawsuit going on. They're looking at the lawyers' fees already, which probably
okay. I see what you mean, Dexy.
If they fight it, it's going to cost them more than $64,000. If they give into it, they're going to have to make more than $64,000 worth of changes to their game inside to comply with the patent. Or if they settle and are given an exemption for the patent, they're allowed to continue. So from a purely business perspective, it looks like that settling is the most sensible option. It's just a matter of, is a company going to stand on principle? They might do, but that's not normally what business tends to do.
I agree. I think that the sensible business choice would be to settle. I think that our entire industry would be at a loss for them to do so, and I hope that they fight them.
Yeah, that's what I think Nintendo are probably banking on.
Yep, especially with such a small suit there. And no, for the person who asked, no, Pocket Pair is not owned by Sony. They are partners in Palworld Entertainment, joint venture company that will develop Palworld's intellectual property in further ways. They're not owned by Sony. It is a...
Okay, so what I'm getting from that, right? Maybe the smaller, less significant cost, right? Settlement of $32,000. It's almost like, it's not that much money, It's not that much money. Let's just pay it, have them remove it, call it a day, right? Than to risk going into a lawsuit, which would pretty much cost so much more. And what they're saying is it just seems like Nintendo might be banking on that. It's almost like a bait. Either way, Nintendo feels like they're going to win. But I feel like taking the slighter options, hey, I'm doing you a favor. I'm not even suing you for that much, $32,000 in comparison to the millions you've been making. That's pocket change. You know what I mean? But I love Palworld. Just wish they gave me side corner roof shingles so I can make my Shogun castle. Felt that.
Partnership. But yeah, no, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not on the side of Nintendo for this. I think Nintendo's making a misstep. I think Nintendo has eroded much of its positive public sentiment towards them over the last several years. You've got them treating kind of the Smash community really badly. You've got them going after creators on YouTube. You have them now doing this, attacking other companies in what looks like really slimy ways. I am not on Nintendo's side here. I think that this is...
We need to bring you back to the lab, Kazu. That was such a crazy... For those of you who don't know, I played Palworld with Gacha Gurus. And a bunch of friends. And that was, let's just say they got very in character, with a particular section of Palworld. It's kind of wild.
This is too much. And
Nintendo makes better Pokemon games instead of suing competition. No, literally, make better Pokemon. I gotta say, the Pokemon games have been pretty good. I feel like Nintendo and Pokemon have been doing such a great job in the way that they're revolutionizing the way that Pokemon has been played and how accessible it is. Even Pokemon Pocket, that has come out, and I enjoy playing Pokemon Pocket. It brings me back to the days where I played Pokemon, the trading card game. So I feel like Nintendo's done a lot of good things and has found innovative ways to make things accessible to people. And to make things still new and fresh, but still making it very easy for its core audience, something that's very recognizable. So I think besides Pokemon, there was really no other competitor that was could compete with that. I think up until Palworld. I could be wrong, but Palworld seems to be the most formidable in when it comes to competition with Nintendo. But simply, in my opinion, because it feels so much like Pokemon. The gameplay feels so much like Pokemon, but just different. It has a base. It's almost like the cake is Pokemon, but the ingredients used is different. And I think that's what makes it different, I think Toriyama's family should sue DQ for stealing designs from his characters too. Really, literally. I'm back from my shower. What did I miss? Hi, Slorin. We're just going over the Palworld lawsuit. And we're kind of analyzing what's going on. Getting some info
I
over
know
it.
It's not the right business decision for them. I hope Pocket Pair is willing to fight them, because I think this is the first chance I have ever seen where Nintendo may lose a lawsuit that it brought to court, and that's never happened before. So I hope
literally
they fight them, and I hope that they're not able to just bully around Pocket Pair and be like, take the $32,000 or take this, 5 million yen, which is about 32 grand. Just give us that money. You've made hundreds of millions. Just let us set precedent to bully people in the future.
Exactly. That's what I was saying before. Oh, here's the side-by-side comparisons. Ah, I see. Okay, these are the side-by-side. So that's this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. Okay, I understand what you're saying. There are key features that are very similar in the designs. However, I will say Pokemon still, if you were to put these side by side, I could probably tell you they're made from two separate companies. like, to me, these look like two different games. Between, obviously, one was made in 1986, the other was made in 1996. So obviously the style is going to be different as this times does, but I think that plays in their favor. The difference, the comparison between Dragon Quest and Pokemon, I feel like is a far more distinguishable difference than the difference between Pokemon and Palworld, where they really look like one-for-ones. It's the same Pokemon, just with different colors. And I think that's more like, this looks weird, you know? In my opinion. Yeah, I don't think Nintendo sees it that way or even cares and just thinks that Palworld is a Pokemon copycat. Yeah. I mean, in essence, I really feel like it is. But what they're suing them for doesn't make sense. They're suing them for mechanics of the game, not for the likeness of the game, which I feel like is a completely different lawsuit, you know? Like, that is one, both of them have to do with infringement, you know? But no, Palworld is a ditto. Oh, Toriyama did designs for Dragon Quest. Okay. I still feel if they did both, I honestly feel like it's still very distinguishably different, you know? To a point, some more than others for sure. No, agreed. Some of them do look very similar. Like, their concepts look very similar. But to me, personally, I don't think the likeliness is enough to sue. If they have sued before, then that's kind of crazy to me. Like, that is actually wild and disgusting. Because to me, it looks very different. But with Palworld and Pokemon, they look very similar. Which is why I am shocked that the lawsuit is more seeming like to help Nintendo bully other games. And more than, hey, you pretty much made your monster a one-for-one of a monster we made. Just in different colors. It's like you just put a different filter on it. Most of the pals are unique or different enough. It's just a couple that feel like clones, which is fine. Like, I think even that is still more legal. Like, I think you would do better in court saying like, hey, we want you to remove these things, these pals. I think that works better than to be like, we're going to sue you for having a feature where you throw something and it captures something, you know? From how it sounds, Palworld is going to try their best. Also, I'm sure there's tons of people who would back them financially. I can totally see investors wanting to back them financially. They can't sue for likeness since they can't prove that they traced it. But patents is something they can use to abuse it, which is probably why they took that sense, because they wouldn't be able to win with likeliness. Nexomon feels more like a Pokemon ripoff than Palworld. Oh, yeah?
I really hope they don't do it, man. I hope they don't take it.
Yeah, the challenge as well is that this is all being obviously bought in Japanese kind of law, which is in
Different,
a lot of ways when it comes to ownership and it comes to patents, what we would call archaic. We wouldn't necessarily say that it's like a move to reflect the times and how things have changed in the Western world, but that's a very different culture over there. And it's important to remember that any Western company that's, say, based in the US has to comply with US patent law, which looks different to this.
Yes.
But it's the start of a slippery slope, and it's not something I think we want to see happening inside the gaming space.
So that is very interesting. So depending on where it's developed, that is the patent law you have to follow. So if this is totally legal to do in Japan, first of all, I think that's ridiculous as hell. And like he said, it's very archaic. Very archaic. Like, wow. You know? And I think Palworld was developed in the Western Hemisphere, right? So it was developed in the West, which already, like, we're following a different set of rules. Palworld probably is following a different set of rules. But the rules that they technically have to follow and the patents they have to follow are the ones under Japanese law, which is very different. So Nintendo could technically maybe win. I feel like there needs to be like an international law for stuff like this. Like for copyright stuff, I feel like there needs to be. Like this is actually kind of crazy. Yeah, that's why Chinese companies make blatant ripoffs a lot. It's yeah, you're right, actually. A lot of Chinese like merchandise and games and companies make bank off of ripoffs and clones pretty much of these games. I wonder how much they get sued. Amazing World of Gumball ripoff. No way. Xian's another one too. Yeah, that's another one. It's actually kind of crazy. These patents are the reason why some Japanese games don't share mechanics. What do you mean? Like don't share, like make it public information, or don't share like they don't, what do you mean by that?
It's really
I think that's the really scary thing about this is you've got Titan, a company that is very beloved in Japan, and you have a new upstart. You've got an underdog. I also don't know what it means when you're a major company and you file for a patent and then go back and retroactively attack a company that also has those same mechanics. Even though I don't understand the Japanese legal process, that feels wrong. That's like, oh, you made something? Well, I'm going to go patent it and attack you. Something about that doesn't feel right. Like, that shouldn't be that way. Has this happened before? I've not seen this happen before. Not in this way.
Things haven't happened like this before. No, this is the start of a bit of a shift. The multiple lawsuits we've seen coming up recently have been a bit of an alarming one where businesses are kind of going at it. What we would see is very anti-consumer kind of methods and reasons. It
does definitely seem like that. Like how the game is played. They will patent you train a character. They visibly show it with character emoting and numbers going, so no other game can use that. I see. So they have to make mechanics that are very specific and then patent to it so that no other game use that very specific feel or style. I feel like it has to be really unique to win. You know, for it to be patented, I feel like there needs to be a clause where this is revolution, like not necessarily revolutionary, right? Because you can say revolutionary, which is like this was the first game to do something like this, you know? But if it's not super technical, like, okay, so let's say, for example, right, if I create a game, and in my game, when a character levels up, they get like a halo, a temporary pink halo, wings, and they lift off of a platform, right? Temporarily, right? As they're leveling up. That is a patent. Like that, I think, is a patent because you can do that same sequence differently to indicate that a character is leveling up. But if some other game did the exact same thing, like I glowed pink, they had a halo, they had wings, and they levitated for a bit, like then you took from me, you know? Like that is my trademark design. That is mine, you know? But if someone just leveled up and they levitated for a bit, I feel like that's not enough to be like, oh, now I'm gonna sue you because in my game, my character levitates and your character also temporarily levitates when you level up. My patent is not like, it's not super specific, you know? It's not unique enough where I feel like it can be patented. The patent where a character levitates and indicates level up in a unique way. They aim for the general one so they can sue. Yeah, exactly. It sucks. Yeah, it does. It's too vague. A lot of these patents seem very, very vague.
For those wondering, I find this to be damaging to the games industry heavily. The idea of patenting
100%.
mechanics on its face even at all is disgusting to me. I think it's a really bad move. I don't think you should patent mechanics. I think you should copyright characters, music, art, etc. to protect your intellectual property. I don't think you should ever at any time be able to patent a game mechanic because that robs it from everyone being able to express anything inside that stuff. I think it's a very strange behavior that I wish was struck down as not being possible. I think it's a waste of resources. I think it's a bad use of patents.
And it is 100% agree. Very important to draw out that some people are saying, oh, you know, people shouldn't be allowed to patent this. This is a new thing. This isn't new. Patenting game mechanics has been around for a while, even in the Western world. If you look at things like, you know, the Nemesis system from the Shadow of Mordor games, etc., you know, the Warner Brothers have. That's a patent that exists in the Western world that's never really been infringed upon because it's very clearly done. But like, I'm fully in agreement that we shouldn't be patenting game mechanics and various things like that.
Exactly.
It takes something away from the industry and how it all works, and it gives this shift towards this cold corporate environment rather than this creative and fun and focus on enjoyment environment that we want from the gaming kind of.
Exactly. It hurts the gaming industry in the end. It really does hurt the gaming industry. You can't be creative as you want to be creative, and it just really sucks. By the way, Kazu, off topic, but I feel like Hunger Star Rail 2.7 would be best time to get into it since there's 5-star selector coming up. And then 3.0 is a new update after this next one, which will be adding probably a lot of new stuff. Thank you. I shall have to take a look-see.
For industry.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's rather absurd, to be real with you. I mean, even smaller ones, like there was a patent on mini games in loading screens. Just not allowed to have mini games in loading screens. That one was filed, I believe, in 1995, and it expired in because they only last 20 years. So it's already expired, but it was one of those things that was just like really absurd. Yeah, 2015 expired the loading screen minigame patent, yet in 2017, barely any game does this. Yeah,
the minigame patent. We were talking about that, Chad.
Held the patent for auxiliary games that are minigames that can be triggered during loading screens. And they disallowed anyone from being able to do this because they own the patent on running a minigame inside of another game during a load screen. But we don't really have load screens in that capacity anymore. But this is the kind of thing where you're like, you could have had loading screen minigames the whole time. You just had them. It'd be great, right? Couldn't have them. Not until 2015. This is the kind of thing that's just like, why are you able to patent that?
Exactly. Why are you able to patent that? Just check Nanda Namco had a loading screen minigame patent expire in 2015. But oh yeah, they're literally just talking about that.
It's absurd. That doesn't make any goddamn sense.
Yeah.
The dinosaur game in Chrome technically infringed on that patent? No, because it wasn't really a load screen, was it? It was you're disconnected from the internet.
Yeah, that was a
I was just thinking about the dinosaur thing too, but it is, yeah, you're just disconnected from the internet.
distinguished item. It's not a load screen. That's a like an error screen.
Yeah.
And that's what these patents come down to. They can come down to the absolute smallest kind of feature they can use to differentiate. But if there was a lawsuit brought, you're going to have to argue that, and it's going to be very, very expensive. So a lot of companies just stay away from entire areas of patents just because they don't want to cause a fight, because it's expensive, it's slow, and it takes time.
Yeah.
Which it seems like that is how Nintendo is bullying people, unfortunately.
It takes time, and it creates often a lot of media kind of fury over what should be a small internal matter. I'm not saying dates on these patents don't matter, but they're not as relevant as the fact that there is a lawsuit outstanding on a company, or 3 separate lawsuits outstanding on a company, and that applies a certain amount of pressure.
It's scare tactics. It's really what that is.
One of the principles of law, I mean, I don't particularly agree that the show Suits is a good one for showing how the law works, but there are a few comments in there about settling which aren't inaccurate. You know, it is often far more effective for a company to settle than it is to actually fight some of these things out purely on the merits of cost. Like I've said, you know, business is focused on cost and profit.
Money.
That's how this works at the end of the day. We can't force them to rely on principles, but I fully agree that we, you know, as a consumer base, should be hoping that they choose to fight it on its merits.
Exactly. I think everyone in the community wants to fight it. Like, they want them to fight it. But this really just goes down like, does Palworld want to make money? You know? Because I feel like if they take this lawsuit, right, and they go through with it, there's the potential for them to make more money in the future. Right? Like, sure, it could be expensive, but I feel like even with the amount of money that was being made with Palworld already, I feel like personally they have the potential of making more money with other games if they win the lawsuit. The potential is so much greater. But that's part of the deal, you know? And that's part of the back and forth is, well, we can avoid all of the expenses now, you know, by taking this little cost. And you know, we'll just call it a day. I think it'll be better for them to fight it. The injunction can say, stop making your game. Yeah, that would suck. That would actually suck.
Rather than folding. But that's down to the lawyers and down to the business choices. We can't fault them either way, depending on what they choose, because it's their prerogative.
The part that's really interesting to me is if you look at this and you look at the timings on them, it seems likely, at least in the realm of possibility, that Nintendo did this specifically to attack Palworld.
100%.
The issue that I have with this is if you are able to find a competitor that is doing well in the market, and you go, I'm going to go patent a bunch of things that we've done too, and now they're also doing, and then we're going to attack those with them, even though they were already in the market. That's deeply disturbing to me. Because that's taking this whole thing to another level that is just not all right.
And if you try doing that in the US or, you know, the UK or parts of Europe, then what you would find is as soon as you try filing that patent, someone's immediately going to fight you, and you've got to back your patent up in court, and it can take years to get through it. At which point, you know, every single other game out there is starting to use your mechanics because there's no choice on who actually holds the patent. It kind of lets the cat out the bag. The interesting part here, and I want to look into how you file patents in Japan, is the fact that there doesn't seem to have been any contesting of these patents originally, and how all of that works. That's where you would have found kind of the initial battleground. So if there wasn't a battle on that, why not? Would be my question.
Because you have a very small...
Tier 3, man, for 12 months. Oh, you filled up the orb. Congratulations, Daisuke. Wow, it's been a whole 12 months. Congratulations. Wow, man. OG for real, for real. Oh, man.
Say hey.
Welcome to jail, Smurf. Wait.
That is loud. That is really, really, really loud. What is this ad?
Filed for patent?
Yeah.
Because there could be that too, where it's like, well, you didn't file for a patent, and they did.
Because
like,
that's what's interesting. The case that's being brought is, we have a patent, Pocket Pair have breached it, not Pocket Pair, who need to probably bring a counterclaim related to this, saying this patent isn't valid, this is why. Those have to be, those are separate arguments under law. So they may need to be dealt with as a linked but somewhat separate case. And I'm sure that, you know, Pocket Pair are already way on it.
Yeah, because they'll have to fight basically 2 legal battles at the same time, guys. One of them is to say those aren't valid, and the other one is to say we're fighting them.
Yeah, which is also just deeply disturbing too, to fight 2 separate ones, to be like, oh, here, these patents don't make sense. Like, these patents need to be, like, almost, like, argued against, and then also take up and prove yourself in court with a whole separate argument. It's crazy.
Got, like, multiple fronts on this battle now. It's not simple. It's not as simple as a single court case. You prove it.
Which is very, 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 very expensive.
You have to do multiples.
And Nintendo will be as willing to pay out as much as it takes, basically, to offset the amount that they're losing from doing this, or what they think they could gain in future. And Nintendo has deep pockets, lots of experience, and knows they can settle in for the long haul on it.
Yeah, that's wild.
So they've not got incentive to settle or to back down.
No, they don't. Yeah, they don't have incentive to back down. And Pocket Bear has every incentive to back down too. Unless, and this is the important one, unless this injunction is something egregious. Then they have every incentive to fight. We just don't know what that is. It could be anything.
Yeah. And
payment of 5 million yen plus late payment damages. Man, that 32K ain't looking good.
Sometimes injunctions cannot be...
That's 32 US dollars, by the way.
...be disclosed for various reasons.
Pocket Bear is not indie. They have a partnership with Sony. Indie, they were independent before this. They were fully independent. They couldn't form a partnership with any other company. They had to completely build this game entirely on their own without any publishing experience, without any publishing partners of any kind. They now have a partnership with another company specifically because they did so well. That is an indie company. That is an independent company. Up until now. Sony did that afterwards. So I think that is a detriment to their name to say that they're no longer indie, or that they aren't indie, or that they weren't at the time. Develop Palworld fully as an indie. Will Sony help? I don't know. I don't know what we don't know what their agreement is as a partnership, right? Because it's a partnership. They don't own them. So it really comes down to that. I don't like Sony Publishing. I won't play any games from Sony Publishing because the way that they treated Helldivers 2. But I don't know what their agreement is with Pocket Bear. No clue. Not going to hold that against them. I didn't hold that against Arrowhead either. You know, it's not their fault.
The other thing to consider here is that partnerships are not necessarily set in stone, and if Sony thinks that this is it's too much of a risk to them,
they'll walk away.
They can't proceed with it, they could also walk away. So it depends on a lot of different moving internal parts inside each of these businesses, and I don't think any of us are informed enough to make a really kind of detailed judgment on this.
Oh, geez, that's another thing I didn't even consider. Is that if they are in partnership with Sony. So if they're in partnership with Sony and Sony's like this is just too much, it's not going to be able to it's not going to go well for Palworld, to have your partner be like, this is a lot. Who knows how much is being backed? We don't really know how their contract or the involvement that Sony has with them. I wonder if, or even the cut of the money that Sony is getting with Pocket Pair, it's gonna be really, really, really crazy and harsh if Sony decides to walk away with this too, because Sony's also making money, but if there's already this history where companies tend to want to avoid patents or any familiarity of, hey, this might infringe on a patent, then I'm not going to take foot in it. Sony might be one of those companies where it's this is way, we don't want the smoke, we're just going to walk away, which leaves Pocket Pair, it's are they going to be able to pay for it? How much is the cut that Sony's getting from this game? It's very scary. It's scary.
Yeah, we just don't know enough about Japanese law. Yeah, that's the hard part.
And how their businesses want to work and want to function. If there's already strained relations between Sony and Palworld, this could be enough. Pocket Pair, this could be enough to push them over the edge. But it also, if they're really good friends, Sony could be like, you know what, we're going to join in and help you because we think this is wrong. It could go any way, depending on what's going on inside those companies. We can't jump to any conclusions here.
A lot of people are saying, I hate Nintendo, all this kind of stuff. I don't like this either. I think it's really bad for Nintendo's image. It ruins a lot of the way that I feel about that company, but it doesn't destroy the good memories I have from playing Nintendo games when I was younger. It doesn't ruin the reason for me to get into the games industry in the first place. What they've become now is separate from those. So.
It's also very important to remember that this is not Nintendo devs that are necessarily doing this. This is high up Nintendo leadership, the Nintendo legal team, and people who are kind of in decision-making positions.
That is a very big distinction that has to be done too. Is number one, the development team should not get hate for the game because the development team is completely unrelated to the business side of things. And that's something that needs to be taken into consideration. A lot of people want to be I hate Nintendo, and think of Nintendo as a whole. It's this whole, think of a business as a whole entity. And the reality is that it's not. It's a bunch of different cogs in the machine that are working together in order to market and prioritize and to make sure people are paid and to get the mechanics and the graphics and the coloring and the lighting and the shading and the modeling and the coding. All of that is different cogs in this machine to make something successful. And it's not the entire company, it's not the artists for Pokemon aren't F you, Palworld, it's the higher ups, it's the money that's involved. And that's really the distinction that needs to be made when it comes to these kind of things.
people who are making games for Nintendo or with Nintendo are not the ones at fault here.
Exactly.
This is the top level of the company.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Basically, what it means to me is if a game comes out on Nintendo Switch or something like that, and it also comes out on Steam, I'm buying that Steam version.
Yeah.
How that feels to me. Just play it on Steam Deck anyway. It's like, yeah, this is the interesting part. Game Freak isn't even a part of this, just the Pokemon company.
Yeah, that's likely to do with who holds the patents and who's party to various agreements internally. There's probably some legal intricacy going on there. I've never really looked into the exact relationship between Game Freak and the Pokemon company and Nintendo. There's probably nuance in there. But yeah, this is one to watch, I think. There'll probably be a lot of conversation around this and around patents in general in games.
100%. Definitely 100%. That's what it seems like anyways. Definitely seems like that.